those the participants who can join with an open camera, please do so in appreciation of the presence of Ibu Sabrina. So if I may call you Ibu, Ibu means
no problem.
Miss, Madam. So the students here are from the graduate, undergraduate, postgraduate, and also doctoral studies. We all gathered here. So we all curious with the social work in Germany. So before we go to the presentation, I would like to invite Ibu Bin Hayati as the head of Department of Social Welfare to open the class, please.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ibu Lia. Good afternoon, everyone in Indonesia. Good morning, Sabrina in Germany. We are very happy that finally you are presenting at an international social work class. This class is so special because international social work is firstly introduced in our program at Universitas Pajajaran since the end of 1990s, and it becomes one of the branding course in our program, because after that our course is followed by other universities at the same program. And yeah, this is international social work class that expose the student with the issues about global social welfare issues, as well as the practice of social worker in different countries. So we are happy to learn that you will be presenting about Germany, because we know little about Germany context in social work education and practice. So I think our student will be excited to learn about that. And we will thinking about making something happen that can bring you to Indonesia.
It's
a beautiful country, and our program is great. So you can meet many lecturers and also students who are very welcoming and smart, and also enthusiastic to learn about new things.
I noticed that.
Okay, we will try to make this collaboration continuous with more fruitful collaboration in the future. Again, thank you so much, and congratulations for the Pak Sony, Ibu Lia, and Ibu Eva, who are the lecturers for this course, and also for all of our students who are participating in this lecture. Please enjoy the presentation. Okay, by the way, Sabrina is my friend who I met in Prague last May. And we are very lucky to have her be willing to share her experience for us. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you.
All right. Ibu Lia, I'll return the time to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Titi. Again, welcome, Sabrina. I hope we can meet you in the future physically, so you can come here and do collaboration work in the future. How would you like to be introduced? Would you like to introduce yourself, or I introduce you?
I can introduce myself if it's fine with you.
I might
know more about me.
True, and maybe my pronunciation on German also bad, so I might spell it wrongly. So maybe you can just introduce yourself. please.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for the opportunity. And it's so nice that so many students came. I'm very excited, not just to present, but also to discuss with you at the end of the presentation. I'm very excited to hear what maybe surprises you about social work in Germany and what you would like to know and what you would like to ask. So I'm Sabrina Heine. I'm a research assistant at the International University of Applied Sciences in Germany. And I work in the social work department, but in the distance learning program. So we have a lot of students who might already work in the field, but they're not social workers yet. So they study social work in a distance program so that they can get the additional qualification. And I am a social worker by practice, and I used to always work when I was still a social worker in practice, either with people and clients who suffer from substance abuse or who have disabilities. So that was my field of practice. And yeah, and I got my bachelor's degree in Regensburg in Bavaria, and I also have a master's degree in practical science in social work and social pedagogy. And I got that from the University of Applied Sciences in Berlin, the Alice Salomon University of Applied Sciences, which is a very good school, I would say, a very good university that I enjoyed going to a lot. And yeah, and we're still going to talk about that because there are even some international programs at that university. So I'm going to talk about that as well. Yeah, and if you have any additional questions about me as well, not just like the social work in Germany, you can just ask them at the end of the presentation. And of course, you can always ask questions in between.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Sabrina. Untuk teman-teman yang lain, ada yang kecepatan atau ada yang paham ya apa yang disampaikan oleh Ibu Sabrina ya? Mohon responnya. I approach the participants whether you speak too fast or they need translations.
Yeah, of course.
So please respond, teman-teman. Aman?
Ya, aman Bu, cukup Bu.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think it's safe to be continue with your presentation.
Okay.
For the participants here, Ibu Sabrina will talk about impression of international social work and social policy practice in Germany. So we can ask or find information of how to be social workers in Germany and what are issues that are being addressed in Germany. So those are maybe a hint of questions that you can ask to Ibu Sabrina before we listen to or after we listen to her presentation. Okay, I think Bu Sabrina, the time and the screen is yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so again, I'm very excited to meet all of you and to present in front of you. And I want to give you some impressions of social work in Germany, especially in the context of international social work and social policy practice in Germany. And I've put some different discussion points throughout the presentation. So now that you're listening and focusing on the different aspects, you can already read those discussion points and make up your mind about what you want to ask in the end. So maybe that gives you some ideas if you, or maybe you already have a lot of questions on your own, but yeah, just look at the discussion points and then we can discuss in the end. There were many references and links in this presentation that might be useful to you. And because there were so many, they didn't fit into the presentation, but I've sent a PDF document to your professor and maybe she can distribute it to you. And so that you have, like, you can check like the references and the different links after the presentation as well. And you don't have to write everything down. So yeah, if I'm talking too fast or if you have any questions in between, you can just, write them in the chat or just raise your hand so that no information gets lost. So to give you an insight into social work in Germany in general, we're going to first travel back in time to give you an insight into the historical background of social work in Germany, because we have to understand how social work in Germany came about in the first place. And with that knowledge, we will then be able to analyze the present and to see what social work in Germany looks like now, and also what it looks like in an international context and in the aspect of social policy practice in Germany. And then we are going to talk about how social workers in Germany can step into action, and also what kind of options they have to be politically active. And we are also going to talk about how you can step into action, like what different opportunities do you have to maybe work in social work in Germany or to study in this field, what different options there are, because I thought it might be interesting for you to know. And those links that you might need to check up on that after the presentation are all in the documents that I've sent. So we can start there. So what is interesting about the German state is that we've had social insurance and a social insurance system for quite a long time, at around 1883. And this is because the Reichskanzler back then, Otto von Bismarck, you can see him here, he implemented social insurance at a very early time. And he did this because he wanted to keep the working population basically from protesting or from revolting, because the working population back then during the industrialization was facing very difficult living and working conditions. They had to work many, many hours, hard physical labor, and they also had difficult living conditions. So to keep them cooperative and to give them that security, he implemented social insurance that works in different cases. For example, when you get sick or when you have an accident, you have insurance that will give you some safety during those times. And we still have that system. And yeah, I would say it's very important to us. I think in Germany in general, insurance and having that social welfare system is very important. Child and youth welfare came about in around the 1920s. And the first schools of social work were founded during the 1890s by Jeanette Severin and Alice Salomon, who I already talked about, because there's a University of Applied Sciences in her name in Berlin. And here she is. And she's a very influential and famous figure in social work and for our profession, because she's had like a big impact. She founded the school. She already did a lot of research back then, even in those times. And yeah, so she is a very magnificent woman and very important for us in the profession of social work in Germany. Unfortunately, she had to emigrate during the Nazi regime because of her Jewish heritage. So back then, she was given basically the choice to either leave the country, or she would be forced to, she would be deported to a concentration camp. So she left the country and she emigrated to the US, but it was very difficult for her to continue her career there and to be as influential in the profession of social work as she was in Germany. And there's still a lot of research about her life and the influence of her life on the profession of social work, and also those times. There's an archive about her life and her work, and they have all the documents, like everything she's ever written, even letters or pictures, and they analyze and do research on how her life and her work influenced social work as a profession. So she's a very important figure for us in social work, as you can tell. And that brings us to, an important topic for us and a very difficult topic, which is social work, how it was during the Nazi regime, because there was a divide basically of people in social work who kind of were submissive to the Nazi regime, and they basically filled out all of the orders that the Nazis gave them. So they would, not treat their clients well, and they would you know, fill out the orders that they were given by the Nazis. But there were also social workers who resisted, who tried to be politically active and do different things and took different actions to fight against the Nazi regime. And we still do a lot of research about this. There are a lot of books about resistance in social work during the Nazi regime, but also about the people and the professionals or not professionals in that field who were submissive to that, who did what the Nazis told them, and how could that have happened in the first place, and what different influences led to that, and how can you prevent something like this from happening ever again. So because it's important to note that for sure there was no development in the profession of social work during that time that we could build on afterwards. But as in different other fields, for example, medicine or psychology, some people use that time to get to power. And they would do what they were told during the regime to get into positions of power and to basically help their research and their career. So we have to be we have to reflect a lot on that and do a lot of research so we can see what not to do in the future and how to prevent something like this from happening again. After the Second World War, there were strong US-American influences on the profession of social work, especially during the denazification. So all of the social system and the culture basically had to go through that denazification, and that's why there are very strong US-American influences in different fields, but also in the profession of social work. But as you know, Germany had to divide back then into a East German part and a West German part. And in the East German part, which was the state of the German Democratic Republic, social work was given little importance, because the argument was basically that in a socialist state, the state is already giving a lot of social services, or is already social to the people and to the population. So there is no need for social work. And as we all know, social work can be quite a critical field of the system and of the current politics or circumstances. So that really wasn't needed back then. That wasn't wanted in that kind of state. And another very important development for us in the profession of social work in Germany is came about in the 90s, because back then there was quite some critique on the very generous welfare state, because back then it was comparatively easy to get access to social assistance, to get different social services, and that was criticized because it obviously cost a lot of money. And because of that, there was the new public management was implemented. And that means that social workers and other professionals in the field really had to prove the effects of their work more. And they had to reduce social services and to reduce everything that they were doing for the clients themselves. So it's a very important development, especially because that only made the social workers basically more critical of the current system. So that really strengthened the theoretical strand of critical social work, which is all about the influences of a capitalist system on the living conditions of the clients, but also on social work itself. And it's very oriented and based on the ideas of Karl Marx. So yeah, that basically had like a side effect. You know, the state wanted to get more proof of the effects, wanted to reduce costs, but that really made the social workers more critical. And that's also very interesting when you think about social policy practice in social work, because in Germany, in the German discourse, the need of social policy practice and to be critical of the political system that is in a nation really is mostly based in that critical social work theoretical strand. So yeah, that's also very important to note when you think about the historical background and how social policy practice in Germany is influenced by the historics of the profession itself. So yeah, now that we have that knowledge, and you might have maybe more of a grasp on how social work in Germany even developed, we can analyze the present and look at what social work in Germany looks like now, and also what it looks like in the context of international social work and social policy practice. So for you, especially as students, it might be very interesting how you even become a social worker in Germany. And this is now for everyone who is already in Germany or who is based in the European Union, because there are definitely different laws and regulations for people who come from other countries, for example, out of the European Union. And we will talk about that later. But now we are talking about if you're, for example, a German student or from somewhere else in the European Union, how would you become a social worker? So first of all, you would get a bachelor's degree in social work. So you go to a University of Applied Sciences and you study social work in a bachelor's program. And then you are already able to work as a social worker after that. You only need a bachelor's degree to be active and to be working in the field of social work itself. But if you want to, and you are very driven, you can also get a master's degree. And there are different programs that have different focuses. For example, you could do a master's degree in international social work or in a research related field. So there are different options. And usually, when you get a master's degree in social work, you have more options in the fields in Germany. For example, you could also go into research, or you could work at a University of Applied Sciences, or you could have more options to go into management, for example. So a master's degree really qualifies you further in the field of social work. And you could also technically get a PhD in social work in Germany, but still it's not that easy yet, because we have universities and we have universities of applied sciences. And you study social work at the University of Applied Sciences. And there it's not that easy to get a PhD, because the University of Applied Sciences don't really have that right yet. They don't have the opportunity to give out PhDs. They can only do it either in cooperation with a university, or there are some states in Germany that give that option to universities of applied sciences, but it's a long process and there's different different people who have to analyze the case. Like it's a long and difficult process. And you don't get your PhD in social work directly. You would have to go into one of the related fields, for example, philosophy or psychology, whatever your topic in your PhD is about. So yeah, that's still not that easy, but we are working on it. And there are different organizations who try to make it easier. They give out different tips to PhD students, or they give the opportunity to talk to other PhD students in the field. So we are definitely working on that, but it's not that easy yet. And of course, you could also become a professor of social work at a University of Applied Sciences, and there are different requirements. You have to have a PhD, of course, or you have to have done so much research that is equivalent, but usually you get a PhD. And you also have to have been working for at least 3 years in the practice of social work. Like you have to have been a social worker in a different, it doesn't matter what field, but a social work practice for 3 years at least. And then you need 2 additional years of work experience, but it could also be in research or at a university. And you also have to have experience teaching, of course, if you want to become a professor. So those are the requirements. Not that easy, but yeah, that's what you have to do to become a professor in that field. And that's actually new for us, because in the past, you wouldn't get a bachelor's and master's degree, you would get a diploma at university in social pedagogy. So right now, usually when you're at University of Applied Sciences and you study social work, you're usually not taught by social workers. You're taught by people who got the diploma or who have a degree in a related field, for example, psychologists or a lawyer even. So yeah, that is really changing, because then in the future, when you go to that university, you're going to be taught by social workers, because now the requirements are different. So very interesting development for us in Germany in the education of social work. And you have the option between a public or private University of Applied Sciences. And that is also kind of new for us, because in Germany, there's that conviction that education should be free. And when you go to university, you really don't have to pay high tuitions or fees. It's a very low amount of money per semester, but there are no additional fees usually. But of course, at a private university, that's different. The tuition is higher, but on the other hand, it gives basically everyone the opportunity to study. So that's a new development, and it's also reflected in the literature what the consequences are going to be. I think it's actually quite funny, because in the European and international context, it's way more normal, I would say, to go to a private university and to pay for studying. But in Germany, that's really not the norm. That's a very new development for us. In general, in Germany, we have a corporatist welfare regime, which means that there's a high emphasis on social services and social welfare that is given to the population. And businesses, the government, and unions work together to make that possible, to give different sort of social insurances and social services to the people. And we have different socio-political fields. So for example, and you have to imagine, there's a socio-political strategy behind any of these fields. So the state formulates the strategy, for example, in integration assistance, which is support for people with disabilities. The strategy is to enhance the participation of people with disabilities. And that strategy is being translated into the laws and the different social codes, so that you know what should integration assistance entail, who can get that kind of social service, and how does it have to be carried out in practice. And then that goes into the different institutions of social work where you as a social worker actually work. And basically, that's where you translate this socio-political strategy into practice. So I think that really shows you how political social work really is, because it's basically sociopolitics carried out in practice. And we have different of those different fields, for example, integration assistance, where people with disabilities are supported, or child and youth welfare, for where the focus is to support children and young adults. Or it could be something like elderly care, where older people are supported. And there are very, very different fields, and you can't really separate them like very harshly, you know, where one field starts, the other one ends. That's not always that easy, because sometimes they overlap. And that's why it's not that easy to tell you in general what the different fields of social work are in Germany, because they definitely overlap. And there are different systematizations in the literature. For example, you can divide the fields by the problems that they focus on. For example, the problem could be poverty, so it's social work in the field of poverty, or addiction, or violence, etc. But because it's so difficult to give you a good overview of the fields of social work, I can give you some examples. For example, when you're a social worker in Germany, you could be working in child protective services as a social worker, and you make sure that the children are safe, that there's no abuse in families, for example. You could also, and this is very common, be a counselor in different counseling centers that focus on those different problems. For example, you could counsel people who suffer with addiction, or people who got divorced, who face poverty, or you could also be a social worker in job integration and support people to get back into the labor market. You could also be a street worker, which means that you directly go to the people who might not even have a home. For example, if you're a street worker who focuses on homelessness and substance abuse, the clients don't come to you into an institution, you go to them. You go out and you look for people who might need help. You give out food, for example, or different information about help that the people could need. But you could also be a social worker directly at a municipality, and then you would basically decide who gets social services, who doesn't, based on the laws that we have. So that could also be an opportunity. And as I said, when you have qualified further and you, for example, have a master's degree, you could also be a research assistant. For example, there might be a research project that focuses on a social work related problem. For example, how can we alleviate poverty? What can be done? If there was a research project focused on that, you could be a research assistant coming from the field of social work. That's also an option. And you can be a lecturer, of course, at a University of Applied Sciences, or be employed in any kind of social management. So then you're a social worker as well, but you're on a higher level and you have management responsibilities. And what is also very important to understand about social work in Germany, because it influences social work quite a lot, is that we have different welfare associations, and they employ basically most social workers in Germany. For example, there's Caritas, or the German Red Cross, or the Diakonie. And they basically have a lot of different institutions of social work. And when you want to work for one of these, and you probably will, because they're the biggest employees of social work in Germany, you have to, in most cases, sort of align your values with, or you have to at least be respectful of the values that the different welfare associations might have. And very often, for example, in the case of Caritas and Diakonie, those are Christian values. Caritas is a Catholic Christian welfare association. Diakonie is a Protestant Christian association. So usually when you apply for a job at these associations, they tell you in the beginning that you should be okay with the values basically that they have, and most of the time those are Christian values. And we know from the general code of ethics in social work that the Christian values and the ethics or values of social work, they sometimes align and they overlap, but not all the time. Sometimes we have different motives. So that's very interesting in the German context, because it leaves us with a lot of questions, because in research, especially about social policy practice in Germany, in social work, we have to wonder who are the people that are influential in social policy practice. Is it the welfare associations, or is it social workers individually? And what does that mean? What values do they go by, and how do they affect social politics? So that's a very interesting field in something to know about social work in Germany, and it also makes you understand the context more.
Oh, kita mau memang rusak ininya terus.
So yeah, what's also important to know is that those are the welfare associations. So they give jobs to social workers, they give social services to different people, and they're also politically active. We know that. But in the context of social work, the National Association of Social Work Germany is the association that is basically responsible for holding up the values, doing different campaigns, and making sure that social work is being carried out professionally. So that's the association that is concerned with all of the different aspects of social work in Germany. And so, yeah, as I said, social policy practice in Germany in social work is definitely an emerging field in research and in practice. I think for us, it is fairly new. We don't know that much about it yet. We know different forms of political actions and dynamics, and we also have a lot of international comparison, how other countries do social policy practice. But yeah, we have a lot to find out still. And there are a lot of research projects now that focus on this mainly only on social policy practice in Germany, because there are so many different questions that we don't have answers to yet. For example, what role do the welfare associations have? What role do the social workers individually have? What options do they have to be socially politically active? What can they do? What can't they do? What are hindrances to their political action? So there's still a lot to find out about that. And yeah, and also international social work is also an emerging field, I would say. I guess that there are different programs that focus on international social work, and there might be literature that dates quite a long time back, but I think it until now, I think it wasn't a very popular field of social work. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that when you look up literature about social work in Germany, you really don't come up with a lot of English speaking literature. So that's still something that we are working on as well, to have more literature translated or to write it in English in the first place. Because up until now, that really wasn't very common in the field of social work, that we would, you know, publish in English right away. It's kind of not that common. So that's also still something we're working on, especially because we need like international cooperation. It's very important in social work and also in research in that field. So yeah, but the perspectives that we have in international social work in Germany as of now is we have a high focus on post and decolonialism. So that's very important to us. And that's, I would say, maybe more popular field in social work than international social work is post-colonialism. There's also a focus on diversity and on international social work with migrants and refugees. So I would say that those are the main perspectives in Germany in the context of international social work. But the international context of social work practice is also a bit different. I would say to be a social worker in international context is still rare. I think it's, as I said, an emerging field and there are more options, but I think that most social workers don't work abroad basically, but you could work in, basically do social and educational work with international aid organizations. For example, Caritas, you could be a social worker at Caritas, but not work in Germany. For example, you could be working in any other country. And there are also projects of the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development or the German Society for International Cooperation. So they do different projects that focus on different tasks. And they also have basically job descriptions that where you can apply for one of those projects. Usually they're not really targeted directly at social workers. Usually you would say, we are looking for someone with a degree in social sciences or political science or something related. So I'm not quite sure how many social workers would apply to such a position, but it's definitely an option. If you wanted to be a social worker in the international context, I think those would be your main options to take if you wanted to do that. And as of the centrist theories in German social work, it's quite difficult to say because we have many, many different theories, and of course they all contribute to the social work profession. And yeah, and when you're a social worker in practice, sometimes you need an aspect of one theory that might not be as popular, or another aspect of another theory that might be way more popular. So you can't really say what the central theories are because they're all important. But I would say the most famous ones are social work as a human rights profession by Silvia Staub-Bernasconi, who is actually not German. Silvia Staub-Bernasconi is from Switzerland, but because she obviously published in German, we implemented her theory a lot. And I would say that theory is very influential. There are even there's one master's program that is focused only on social work as a human rights profession. And it's just, yeah, I think it's important also in the context of social policy practice and also in the context of international social work, because Silvia Staub-Bernasconi really touches different aspects here, because she is basically convinced that in social work, like social workers should be responsible to hold up human rights. And if they see in practice that human rights are violated, they should take steps to do something about it and to tell the public. And that's also important in an international context, because if they know that human rights are violated in an international context, they should also get involved. So yeah, that's very interesting for us. And it has just been one of the most influential social work theories, I would say, in our field. And in the very exclusively German context, I think the Lebensweltorientierung is also important. And you can't really translate it into English. I think you can see here that it's sometimes not that easy to translate the literature and to have everything in an international communication, because some things just don't translate that well. Lebensweltorientierung would mostly be translated as an orientation to the life environment of clients. So this theory is based on the fact that if you want to understand your clients, you have to understand what their life environment looks like and what is important to them in their environment, and how to implement that, how to use that to be able to work with clients on an eye-to-eye level. So yeah, that's also a very influential central theory for us in social work. And the core settings, I would say, where you do social work, the biggest fields, I would say, is definitely child and youth welfare. I think most social workers work in that field and they support children, or they work in child protection or in residential homes for young adults and children. I would say it's the biggest field where most social workers are active. Or when you work with adults, but also children, the second biggest field, I would say, is integration assistance. So to support people with disabilities of different ages. It could be children who have disabilities or adults. So yeah, I would say child and youth welfare and integration assistance are some of the biggest fields that social workers are usually active in social work. Of course, there are many, many different settings, and you can be a social worker in another context, but those are probably the biggest ones. And if I was asked about the average salary that social workers get in Germany, it's also very dependent on the field, where you are working, for who you are working. Are you working for the state or for a welfare association? The welfare associations also have different, amounts of money. So that also depends, like where you are working. But on average, when you look it up, it would be around like 4,000 euros per month before tax reductions. So in Germany, we have quite high taxes, not the highest in Europe. The Scandinavian countries have higher taxes than us, but we already have high taxes. So that is very much reduced. So yeah, I mean, if you want to get it very concrete, like you would probably leave with like 2,500 euros that you can actually use for your life. I think it's a bit interesting, the cultural context of this, because I don't know what it's like in Indonesian culture, but in German culture, usually people don't talk about their salary. They don't talk about how much money they make. So, I mean, I was asked to put this in and I did, and it's probably interesting. But I think in Germany, it's very rare to talk about how much money you make. You can tell me after the presentation what that is like in Indonesia, because I would be very interested, because I know in some other European countries, it's different. People talk about how much they make. And I think it's important, because in a workplace, when you know how much other people make, you know how to negotiate about your own wage and how to negotiate well with your employer. So yeah, highly dependent on the field, on the association, of course. So yeah, now you probably want to know, how can German social workers step into action and political action? So there are different forms of political action, social work in Germany that we know of right now. For example, you could be a social worker working with young adults, for example. Then there's a lot of contexts and fields where you would be active in political education. So you talk to young adults about politics, about the political system, how you can vote, and what the different options are, how to make an informed choice, how to educate yourself about the political system, to be a actively participating a citizen in your region and in your country. You could also promote participation and also political participation. For example, a lot of people with disabilities might struggle to participate politically, to vote, to be politically active in different fields. So you can help them to promote that. You could also politically reflect your casework. So it's very important in the context of social policy practice in social work that you not only see the individual causes of the problems that your client might have. For example, they're poor, so you don't just look at what did they do individually to be in this position, to be facing poverty, but also what are the causes in our system, in the political system and the socio-political system, to cause that much poverty in the first place. So that can be something where you as a social worker can be politically active. And of course, that can lead you to, for example, do a campaign for the alleviation of poverty, and not just individually support your client. You can also empower your clients, of course, to be active, to be outspoken. And we also have a lot of self-organizations, for example, in the field of integration assistance. A lot of people with disabilities, they're very active. They organize self-organizations, they do different campaigns, they go to, are outspoken, for example, in the media. And you can also support that as a social worker if there's any support needed, or if there are NGOs where social workers and clients work together. And there's also the option of political analysis to really, analyze the socio-political context of your work and to be very focused on addressing that in your daily social work practice. In the international context, social workers can be active in the form of, organizing campaigns, going to conferences on an international level. And this is often done in cooperation with the International Federation of Social Work. So for example, if you're a member of the National Association of Social Work in Germany, you can find ways to organize campaigns in cooperation with the International Federation of Social Work, or you could just join conferences. So yeah, I think it's interesting for students, and we also tell this to the students at our University of Applied Sciences, that the fee for attending a conference is usually less for students. So I think you should take advantage of that and maybe try to join some international conferences, because it's usually cheaper for students. And I think it's a very interesting experience that you can use to develop further in your professional identity. And if you want to do an exchange, I found different options of the Council of International Fellowships. I think this is quite interesting. They have a list of the different countries, and they basically advertise for different options to do an exchange. And they have different durations. Sometimes it's just 2 weeks, sometimes it's a whole month, where you can go to another country and look at what social work is like there. And you can just go along with the social workers in that country and see what it's like. But this is for social workers. So this is something that you could do after you got your degree, and you may be even already active in the field of social work. And there's even, I mean, this is on the document that you're going to get. There's even an exchange in Germany. I think it's next year in the spring or something. So yeah, very interesting that there's that option for social workers. And if you wanted to become a social worker in Germany, coming from Indonesia, there are also different requirements. For example, you, of course, need your foreign professional qualification. So you need your bachelor's degree from your university in Indonesia. And you then need to apply for determination of equivalence. So of course, the German state has to make sure that your degree is equivalent with one that you would get in Germany. And it's not so much about if that degree has the same quality. It's more about what do you have to know about the social system in Germany so that you can be a social worker in Germany. So that's more, and sometimes, because I know some one friend, for example, she came from the US as a social worker, and she also had to apply for this determination of equivalence, and she had to do some additional courses on the welfare system in Germany, because it's just very different in the US. So yeah, you definitely have to be personally suitable, so that is also checked that you are healthy enough to be a social worker in that field. And you need German language skills at the level of C1. And if you have, I think this is very important, if you have any ideas on campaigns or international corporations, you can contact the National Association of Social Work Germany directly. And if you want to address the national level, so you have an idea for a cooperation between the national level in Indonesia and Germany, you can use this email address. But as I already mentioned, Germany is divided into different states. So there's different regulations, different associations, and on the regional level in Bavaria, you can use this mail, and that would be forwarded to the head, basically, of the association. Or you can also text me via mail directly, because I can forward your requests as well, because I'm also a member of the National Association of Social Work. So yeah, I think that's very interesting. And from what I've heard, being in the National Association of Social Work, there was also have been some events where social workers from all over the world came together to Germany to see the different culture and also to present social work in their country. So there have definitely been those cooperations, but of course, as you might know, it sometimes can be a lot of work to organize them. But if you have an idea, we can always get on that. So I think that's very important. And as I said, because it might be interesting for you, I put together some options for you to study abroad. For example, at the University of Applied Sciences in Fulda in Germany, there's an international course in social work that is directly targeted at social work students from all over the world. So you can apply and you can take this course. And I think it's a very interesting option to develop professionally, to get different perspectives on social work in the international context. There's also a master's program directly in international social work with migrants and refugees in Bavaria at the University of Applied Sciences in Würzburg. So yeah, that's, as I said, that's one focus of international social work in the German context. So that would also be an option to apply to that. And there's a master's program, as I said, in social work as a human rights profession at the Alice Salomon University of Applied Sciences in Berlin. And you know what's interesting about these programs is that they are mostly held in English. So you, of course, would have to talk to the university how much of a German language skill you need, but a lot of the content is in English because those master's programs are directly targeted at students from all over the world. So yeah, those are definitely some interesting options, but you always have to check with the university beforehand, of course. You have to maybe write an email or yeah, just get in contact and ask them what the specific requirements are. And from what I've seen, if you want to study abroad in Germany, your university should be a partner university of the university in Germany. So if that is not the case, because that's not that common yet, I think, to have like an Indonesian partner university, then you can always call the international office or write them an email and ask if you still have the option, even though your university is not a partner university yet. It could maybe be one in the process, but sometimes there are exceptions and you can organize it yourself. So that's also an option. And the Alice Salomon University of Applied Sciences in Berlin has a very good international office, a very big one, and there are a lot of international students every year, and there's a lot of exchange and additional programs. So yeah, if you were interested in that, I would just contact the international office. It might take some time before they get back to you because they're very busy, but their service is very, very good. I also studied abroad during my master's program. So yeah, it was very, very nice, very good experience, and the international office was very good in service. So yeah, that's basically the impressions of social work in Germany. I hope I wasn't too fast, and you can definitely just ask any question you have for further, yeah, for further, so that you can understand the information.
Okay, thank you. It's very your presentation. Okay. So maybe I have to. So wait. So this is the problem with the hybrid course.
Oh yeah, of course.
The devices and technology. Okay, be mindful with the time. We are at 1 o'clock Indonesian time. So just tell me if you need to stop and go to your meeting. But we still have 45 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. We have 40 minutes to discussion. Thank you for the presentation. It was very insightful. And we know that now in German, there are a lot of changing, a lot of shifting on social work. One that was interesting for me is that in your country, the source references are still in German. So you need to translate those into English. But here in Indonesia, we use very much English reference. So we still have the influence of United States or the United Kingdom's writers, authors on social work. And also that's also, we are trying to make the unique of, because Indonesian mostly Muslim. So, but in social work, we are still using that Protestant ethic because of the references that we are using are still from United Kingdom and also United States based references. So thank you for bringing those up. And I think we also have questions and Adlia already raised her hand. So before that, actually, we have a question that in the chat coming from Pak Hadianto. Adlia, can you wait for a minute? Because Pak Hadi has chat the question earlier in the meeting chat. He asked about how about the implementation of social policy to social services in Germany today related to issue of Russia and Ukraine war.
Oh, okay.
Any changes or what the implementations like?
Yeah. So that's very interesting, and I think it's I think some students asked kind of a similar question in the different lecture. So with the people and refugees coming from Ukraine, they have, you could say, special rules and regulations. From what I've understood, in that context right now, where from the start of the war, Ukrainian refugees have different options than, I would say, other refugees had, because right now it's easier for them to start working right away and to find an apartment. They're not usually they don't have to go to special facilities in the beginning, because usually in the beginning people have to go into special institutions, and then they can go out into the normal job and housing market. But for Ukrainians, because of the situation, it was changed. It's easier. They can work more earlier in the process. They can apply for normal housing. So yeah, of course, yeah, a lot of different European countries tried to make it as easy for them as it could be because of the difficult situation. And there's definitely social workers that work with those refugees right now. So yeah, but yeah, you could really say, I mean, that's something that we reflect on, that a lot of social workers are criticizing in a way, because we've had other refugees, for example, from Syria, who faced very different circumstances. It was very, very difficult for them to enter the job and the housing market, and that made it then of course there was a high demand for social work in that context, because people couldn't do anything. They had to wait for such a long time to be able to work here, to get an apartment here, and that's why a lot of social work was needed, because they were in this transition phase. And for Ukrainians, it's more about, I would say there's more counseling, for example, on trauma, to process all of the things that they have been through, but they don't need as much support with housing and jobs, like more in a normal way, like everyone else in Germany would have, if they would have had that experience, or if they have children. So I would say there's less social work even needed in that context, but I would say it's more focused on counseling. So that's what we mostly do. But yeah, a lot of social workers are criticizing this. Of course, it's a good thing. We should always do this. We should always, in a situation of war or in any of those exceptional circumstances, we should make it as easy as possible, because people have been through enough, but it should be the same for everyone.
Yes. Yeah, it's really intriguing, because I also follow the news on Syrian refugees to Germany, and how the European countries are blocking from the Syrian refugees. Yet with the Ukrainian, it's very different. So I think it would it bring a different perspective on how Europeans are addressing the issue of refugees, but from different countries. And I think that would be interesting. That is interesting fact, and it's still occurring as well. Then it's still and in the name of diversity, or why would you differentiate the treatment from the Syrian as well as from the Ukraine? So thank you for bringing that up and being honest with that. Okay, next we go to Adlia, please.
Kuliah, I think Kashinas has already gave a question before me.
No, that's okay. I think Sinas may also speak for herself.
Okay.
So she shouldn't write also. Okay. Okay. You can.
Okay. Hi, good day. My name is Adele, and I'm also one of the students in Pelajaran University, and I'm on my thesis era. Actually, what's interesting about today's lecture is aligned with my current job. I just want to share my experience about social policy interventions in international practice. I'm also a social worker at international faith-based NGO called Church World Service, where our objective is child protection, which assisting unaccompanied and separated children in Indonesia, where they're basically a refugee coming from Afghanistan, Somalia, and Sudan. We're providing their education, basic needs, and monthly allowance. And the main issues that they are having right now is the resettlement, which many third countries like Australia, Canada, US, and Germany as well. Now they have their own regulation that many of them no longer accepting refugees and or limited the amount of person they're accepting. One of the recent information is that the German government has announced its decisions to resume the process of accepting and resettlement of Afghan refugees. And that's kind of impacting the resettlement issues, especially in Indonesia. Like their stress of these conditions kind of increasing. Sometimes many of them coming to UNHCR office to protest and stays like a week, build a tent, bring their whole family, crying child, etc.
Yeah.
And two of the kids, which under my PIC, are telling me they want to end their life because they wait more than 4 years and so many psychosocial issues. Also, they have limited access to have income since they've not allowed to work officially. And it is a very complicated setting for us who involved in this field. And this objective only applies to kids under 18. So before they're graduated from our side, we'll provide like vocational activities such as cooking, barbershop training, life skill experience, and induction on how they should behave in a different setting. Because like from previous period, we put them in a group home, but now they're living in a rent room in the Greater Jakarta area. So, and we're also providing monthly medical checkup and health insurance. I think that's all that I can share, that even we already have our standard of providing welfare practice, many of our beneficiaries still have their own perspective of trust that we can easily manage. Thank you, Sabrina.
Yeah, thank you for your contribution and nice to meet you. Yeah, I also think I think it's very interesting as we are talking about it right now. Like, I mean, that's what social workers' duty, basically, especially in the theory of social work as a human rights profession, because that's exactly what it is. And that's what social workers have to just tell the public, to publish about it, to go, talk to politicians, to and to just tell those stories. That's what the consequences are. And as you can see also from this story, and I've also experienced that in Germany myself, for example, with people who come from Afghanistan, this like keeping them in this waiting transition phase of they cannot work yet, they cannot live somewhere yet, is causing so much side effects that you again have to work on and cost even more money. So there is no reason to keep up this policy. There's also makes no sense, in my opinion, to not give people from Afghanistan refuge. This makes no sense, but I've experienced it in practice a lot, even though or people are basically held in this transition phase, or their appeal for refuge is always postponed until they have years of just being and then they don't have a permanent visa. They're just there's a word for that in German, but they can stay in the country, they're accepted to be there, but there's no permanent visa that they could do anything with. So still not working, still not living in a normal apartment. So yeah, it makes no sense. It just makes more work, costs more money. And you see in the case of the Ukrainian refugees that giving them, for example, access to the labor market right away is the best thing, because it costs less. Like, that's basically what it is. And it's more humane, of course, but it also, like, it makes no sense to do it any other way. because because it costs more money in the end. So yeah, I think that's very important, and also important to emphasize the interconnectedness of it, you know, because you've said now when, you know, the European Union or Germany or Australia or the US are not accepting them, then they have to find another place to live where that welfare system is then being is being addressed and is taking a toll on that welfare system. So yeah, I think that's of course a very sad situation and a very unjust situation, but for us interesting in another way. It shows us even more that social workers not only have to help those individual families, but also have to, for example, publish articles or give out statements, or, you know, to be politically active on that level, to showcase what the situation actually is, and to find different ways to do that, and to really work with clients in like on the same level, to not ever feel like they did anything to come in this situation. No, it's the, you know, systemic circumstances that makes it so, and to really work with clients and to give them a voice, and to try to, but also do that in an international context. And that's why I think, for example, this cooperation with your university, or the like German-Indonesian cooperation, is very important, because then we can see things that we usually cannot see, because then there's that urge to you know, not accept the refugees, so they go somewhere else, or to not think about the consequences of climate change because they're not as apparent here. But through this cooperation, I think there's a different way to show the consequences, because you're in contact with someone who is already affected or affected by your actions in another country. So that's why I think it's important to be politically active as a social worker, but also to be internationally connected and have that cooperation, to have those two aspects that we are talking about today, because of those cases that our clients are actually facing.
Right. Thank you. That shows how complicated the social workers' job is, and that means worth wait. So that amount of because I think it will also connecting with a question from Justika, but we provide the opportunity for Sinas to ask the questions first.
So, hi, Sabrina. I would like to thank you first on such a meaningful insights, and it is interesting for me personally to see how social workers is developing and really flourishing in Germany. And I have questions regarding the social issues and problems in Germany. Like, do Germany currently have specific issues that they are currently have like urge to tackle or solve?
Thank you, for your question, and nice to meet you. Current issues. I mean, as I said, we always probably invest most resources into, you know, child and youth welfare and also integration assistance. What is becoming more difficult in Germany, I think, is that housing gets more and more expensive. So of course, people who already might not have a job or have a disability or facing any issues have it even harder. And sometimes they, of course, it's a big risk to slip into poverty. I mean, of course, in Germany, we have like a security system that will kind of keep you from, that can basically always keep you from ending up homeless. You know, like you can still be homeless if you, for example, don't apply for the social assistance, or you have problems with, for example, the job center that distributes the services to you. But even if you do all of that, you could still be poor, of course. You know, it keeps you from the imminent and greatest danger. But now that housing is becoming more is expensive, and also of the inflation, you know, everything is more expensive. there's a higher risk for ending up poor. But again, when you compare it, to other countries, it's still, a relative poverty that can be alleviated a bit easier if you take certain steps. But the risk has probably increased, especially for children, to be facing poverty. But but those things are still addressed through the general socio-political fields that we have. So for example, if it's a child that is facing poverty, through the child and youth welfare field, we would try to support that child. But in the end, that problem is not just dependent on what social workers do, but on the general politics that we have. What party is in power and what do they decide to do. So still, again, important for social workers to be politically active and to kind of show what clients are facing, for example, in the field of poverty. So I guess the risk of ending up poor in Germany has increased, definitely, but still when you compare it to other countries, also in Europe, it's easier to alleviate it, and there could probably be political decisions to make it even more easy, but that's up to the current political system that we have.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, social work is always connecting with the political situation, also the political will of the politicians and also the people, those in power in the recent times. So
Yeah.
I think that's why we also have to have that the skills and knowledge on social policy, because that will influence how we practice with the clients. Thank you very much, Sabrina. I hope, Sinas, your questions are being answered.
Yeah, I hope so. If
Okay.
not, you have to ask again, of course.
But still, poverty is a threat in Germany as well. That's because Germany is a wealth country, so I don't think that poverty would be a threat for people in Germany, but it's actually a threat for them as well.
Yeah. Now more than it used to be, but again, it's a different kind of poverty. I mean, you have to always see it in comparison, because even with the inflation, even if you go to for example, a country in the Balkan, in southern Eastern Europe, it's different. Sometimes the food and housing will be, or housing not so much, but food, for example, and appliances are as expensive as in Germany, and the average wage is way lower. So, and in Germany, if you don't have a job and you don't have a house, then usually the state and the job center pays for your housing. It has to be adequate housing, but then again, when you can't find anything else, they have to approve it, because you need a place to stay, and you always get the same amount of money of assistance. But of course, now that might not be enough, because all of the prices have risen. But there's, of course, it always gets improved. Like, there's always a little bit more social assistance as the inflation rises, and they're also try to get bonuses from the state because of inflation. So we really try, and we have a system to alleviate it more. But then again, when you're in a special group, for example, you're a single mom, then your risk is obviously higher than that of the average person. So yeah, we still try to keep an eye on that, and the risk is higher. But again, in the comparison of Europe,
that's
or
still higher compared to Indonesia. Okay, that is interesting. That's why we need the comparison. Also, that's why we need to do the comparison, so we can learn from one another. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you, Sabrina. We still have two more questions, or I think we still have 4 more questions. I hope you can address all the questions before the certificate deliverance and your closing statement. So another question is coming from Justika. Yustika, would you like to speak for yourself? Please.
Thank you, Kuliah. Hello, Sabrina.
Eh,
First of all, I would like to inform you that we have a same culture in Indonesia with you, that we usually don't talk about the salary or mention
yeah.
about.
Thank you.
But when I convert the euro to rupiah, is our currency, it's a huge, large amount, and it makes me wondering if there's any chance that I can apply to the social work in Germany, because it's so large, you know.
That's written
about-
questions in the meeting chat.
Yes, and then I just would like to know that how about this people in Germany realize that they have aware, or they realize that they have they need the help of social worker in there, because in Indonesia, I still think that we don't have really paid attention about the role of social worker itself. So I just wondering that how your society in Germany have that realize it, that they had a social worker. That's my question, Sabrina.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your question. And also nice to meet you again. I think we met already.
Yeah, you hear me, yes. I'm a
Yeah,
moderator in the latest class that you attended. Thank you.
yeah.
Notice.
Nice to see you again. Yeah. So yeah, the salary, as I said, the number that I put is before tax reduction. So there's, tax, of course, is being taken away from that. So it's about 2,500 euros, and that's a good, or maybe more average, 2,000 euros probably a month, after taxes. So interesting to know that it's the same culturally, that you also don't like to talk about salary, but yeah, in this context it might have been interesting. So yeah, I mean, when you compare it to other professions where the people have to study to get into their job position, it's not that much. For someone who has studied, it's not that much, but I mean, that's what social workers of course say. And that's also true, and you can be at an association where you make less, of course. But I think that in the field also, for example, in research of social sciences and psychology, if you were a research assistant, I think it's about the same. So I think just in that field, of social science and social work and stuff, it's kind of the same. And how you can become a social worker in Germany. What is interesting right now is that I don't know what it's like in Indonesia, but in Germany we have a very, very large and bad shortage of working staff in general, but also in social work. So if you apply to become a social worker right now, your chances are very high of getting the position, because we have a really high shortage. And we would, I mean, on one hand, I say we would love for people to come from other countries and become a social worker in Germany, because we have such a high shortage. And I think it would really add, to our experience and to the field itself. But of course, there are requirements. That's always the case when you come from outside of the European Union. And I've put the link into the PDF document so that you can look it up, because there's a website from the state that will tell you of the requirements. You have to have your degree, from Indonesia. You have to apply for the equivalency, so that we know that your degree is equivalent to the one in Germany. And you have to have the language skill in German for like the level of C1. So those are and you have to be personally suited. They have to check if you're healthy enough, if you're, suitable for that profession. So those are the general requirements. And yeah, but I mean, I know, like, I have a friend from Indonesia, but she's in a different field. She's a doctor, so she's a medicine. And for her, the process was very long. So you have to, I think that if you come to Germany, I think for social workers, it's easier. It doesn't take as much time. But what you have to have in the beginning is definitely, you know, money to get started. Like, you need money in the beginning to kind of cross those times, to overcome those times where you get the where your degree is still checked. So for her, that was the most difficult, I think, to wait for all this time before she would get the go to be working as a doctor. But as a doctor, it's of course, it's way more difficult than as a social worker. So yeah, but I think if you're really interested in the country and of working here, it's most likely worth it. But what she told me, and I think this is quite interesting, she told me that as a doctor, in Indonesia, as a comparison between Indonesia and Germany, it was kind of the same, because in Indonesia, the taxes are not that high. So she would have basically gotten out the same amount of money as a general practitioner. So that's also something to think about. I don't know how it is in social work. We would probably have to compare and calculate that, but yeah, I think in some fields the difference might not be that high because of the difference in the taxes. And yeah, your second question, how do clients or people here know about social work? So we've talked about this in the other lecture, that also in Germany, social work isn't that much of a famous or known profession. A lot of people don't know what social workers do specifically, and what their role is. So we're also still working on getting, you know, the image of social work out and to improve it via, you know, campaigns, for example. But how people know, I mean, people need support in any field, and then they are basically directed to the institutions of social work, and that's when they find out, okay, there's a social worker working. What is also difficult for us, I don't know if you've had that same problem, but of course a lot of social workers work in child protection, and whenever there's a case of, you know, something going wrong, for example, a child being harmed or someone's children being taken away, of course that's a negative experience, and it's sometimes associated with social workers. So sometimes there can even be a negative image of social workers being, you know, taking your children away or something. So that's also important to campaign against that and to make it clear that those are individual specific cases that have to be prevented, and that we are doing everything to prevent, you know, any kind of unprofessional conduct. But that, yeah, social workers do a lot more than that. They don't just work in child protection. They have different responsibilities in society. So yeah, I think it's still a work in progress for us as well. I think in general, I think that's why it's so interesting for me to talk to you and discuss with you about this, because I think we can also learn a lot from the Indonesian social work and from the Indonesian context. I think there's a lot of things that you already do more than we do. For example, to, you know, go into the English-speaking field and to publish in English and to show your perspective. For example, your take on Islam-based practice, you know, on spiritual perspectives on social work. I think that is amazing. And in Germany, we try to do the same, but we're also on the way to getting there. But I'm very, very amazed with Indonesian social work and Indonesian research in social work. So yeah, I think I have to say that I'm learning probably just as much or more than you with these discussions and this cooperation. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. Yustika, do you think that to answer your question?
It's enough, Ibu.
I think we need to think again whether, because of the case of the doctor,
Yeah, I know.
think the money is similar with the Indonesian.
Yeah.
So I think we need to rethink about that. Okay, I'm just being mindful with the time because I don't want to hold you from your next agenda. As Buditi informed, you need to be with the meeting. Are you
Yeah,
still
9 o'clock for me. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, in a meeting. Are you still okay until we still have like 8 more minutes?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and we still have a lot of questions here. And we still have also a certificate of difference for you. But I would like to invite the students in the class to ask questions before we close the session. I'm sorry to all the participants that write questions in the meeting chat. Maybe we can answer that questions after the session.
Yeah, of course,
through
of
writing.
course. Yeah, if there are questions left, you can send them to me and I can send you the answer, and maybe you can distribute the
Yes.
answers to the questions. Okay.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay, we give opportunity to the class to ask questions. Anyone who would like to questions, please do so. Siapa tadi yang
All right, so, Sabrina, could you see me and hear me loud and clear?
Yeah.
Thank you, appreciate it. Previously, I want to introduce myself. In short, you could call me L, as in the letter of L. And first of all, I want to appreciate you for describing how social workers work in Germany so clearly, so that I could understand most of it. And most of the times, you've been talking about how social workers later would work in the field of child protective services, individual psychological states, municipal social workers, and academic fields, even in political fields. So I'm curious about one thing, and my question would be, if we could assume, and I guess we all could agree to this one thing, that Germany, in terms of country, is an advanced country, and while Indonesia is a developing one, and hence there are a lot more poverty cases and pre-empowered communities in Indonesia rather than in Germany. So my question would be, what about community development in Germany? Is that field included in the social work practices in Germany, or is it excluded from it? And would you like to tell us a story of how community development does work in Germany? I guess the question would be that. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for your question, and nice to meet you. Nice to get to know you. Now, of course, there's also community social work in Germany. It's called very different. Again, not like, yeah, I think this is one of the reasons that social work literature wasn't translated that much into English, because it's really called different and there's a different context. So it is community social work. It's called Gemeinwesenarbeit. So yeah, but it's basically the same thing. So yeah, that's also a context in which social workers can work. And it's, yeah, mostly targeted at, areas in a region or in a town that are, more struck, for example, by poverty, or yeah, those are basically areas where, the state and the social services can't really reach the people that well. So, for example, there might be a area where people live, and it could be kind of, we also have like, ghettos and, areas where there's a lot of poverty. And in those areas, of course, social workers try to, to try to get those social services really into the community where they are not reaching yet. But I think social work in that context, and that's also getting very apparent in the literature, is almost more political than other fields, because when there's a community and there's a region in a town where social services or the social assistance doesn't reach the people, then there's clearly a socio-political problem, or a fault in the socio-political strategy that is even formulated by the state to address that. So from what I've seen, because I didn't work in that field, but from students researching in that field, professors researching in that specific field, those social workers really, more than in other fields, try to be politically active, try to talk to politicians and show them, this is the situation, this is the area, this is what it looks like, and you need to, we need to find ways to get social services into those communities. And what we also try to do is, in those communities, we try to really focus it on the needs of people, and really to get citizens involved, and to tell, from them tell us what they need. I think for a social worker in that context, it's very important, and that's what I hear, to first get into contact with the clients directly and to gain back their trust, because usually they're, disappointed by the current system because they're not being addressed and social services don't get to them. And sometimes, or very often, there might be different cultural contexts. A lot of migrants or refugees are affected by this problem or live in those areas. So you first have to get into contact with them, address what they specifically need, and to then get that into the regional political system and to show, okay, this is what is done. What I hear from practice a lot is that social workers do that. They get into contact with clients, they tell the regional politicians what these people need and what they voiced, what they want, but then sometimes the money is still used for other things that those people did not say that they need. So that's still also a field where we need to work on. I mean, of course, sometimes it works. Sometimes there are campaigns and projects that work well, where the relationship between the politicians and the social workers and the clients works well. But that's why it's also a big field of research right now, because we need to improve that. We need to, and I think that's a big thing as well, that still has to be researched in the German context, the relationship between politicians and social workers. So we know that in small regions, for example, in Italy, it works best when the politicians have personal connections with the social workers and the citizens, because they can really see, okay, this is how people are affected. And if that's in that area is not possible because politicians are kind of too far away from, they don't know anyone, and social workers don't have a good relationships with them, then it can be difficult. So that's definitely, and also there are areas in Germany where those, that ghettoization happens because the economy there might be bad, because there was, for example, a big factory there. And we have this area in Germany where there were a lot of factories, a lot of coal mines and stuff. And once they all went away because they weren't needed anymore, there was a lot of poverty in those places. But I think, also a field, I think in general in Germany, we still have to figure out how social workers can be politically active effectively. Not just we know that a lot of social workers are politically active from research, but they still have no systematization behind it. They have no theory and they have no structure behind it. So they do it as they go, they do it when they're motivated to do it, but it's not general practice. And I think that's important. It has to be general practice so that it's more targeted at the actual problem.
Right.
I hope that answers your
Yes. Is that good? Answer the question?
Uh, so if I may conclude this, so the term social workers as an advocator really is implemented right there, and the interconnection amongst the stakeholders right there will be the key to a successful community development in Germany. That'd be right.
Yeah, definitely. I think everywhere. It's probably important too. But yeah, it's so interesting. I think it's interesting what different fields you as students are interested in. And I think, yeah, you should really be encouraged to do something with that. If you have an idea, for example, about how to get those stakeholders in communication and to cooperate, do it. Try to get that idea out there. And also the example with refugees from Afghanistan. I think it's important for you as a practitioner or as a student to, get those stories visible by, I don't know, campaigning or writing an article. I think that's so important. You have very well ideas, you're still very motivated, and you see it from a different perspective as someone who might be working for a long time already in social work has. So I think that's very important, and yeah, I hope you're encouraged to do stuff about it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I think the nearest action would be writing articles and
Yeah.
to have the ideas into a writing, so then being published, also being public known to anyone that have the same ideas. I think that would be the nearest possible task for the students.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sabrina. It's really sad to end this meeting, but we don't want to hold you from another meeting. So because we now at 1:48 p.m. I think the to class photo, we ask Sony to deliver a certificate of appreciation for you, for willing to come to the online class for us to inform us about social work. To Pak Sony, please, the screen and the time.
Sabrina. I want to give certificate for you. Thank you very much about sharing knowledge about social work and social policy practice in German. You are good presentation, systematic and clear. And for you. And I want to give certificates.
Thank you so much,
Sabrina. Okay, be applause for Sabrina.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you so much. And thank you so much again for the opportunity to speak in the first place and also to discuss with your students, because that's the best part for me.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina. And
Thank
I
you.
want to do a little Indonesian language for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Indonesia. Terima kasih. Please, your say terima kasih.
Can you say it again?
Terima
I've
kasih.
heard it. I've okay, slowly. Slowly.
Terima kasih. Terima kasih. Thank you. Terima kasih. Please, you say terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Okay. And answer sama-sama. Please.
What?
Say sama-sama, sama-sama.
Sama-sama. Sama-sama.
Sama-sama, please. Say.
Sama-sama.
Oh, okay.
I still have to learn. I have a long way to go.
And the first again. I want to learn Sundanese language. Thank you, terima kasih in Indonesia, and Sundanese language, hatur nuhun.
Atur nuhun.
Oh, yeah.
Ah.
And answer sawang sulna. And answer sawang sulna. Please, sawang
Oh my
sulna.
Again?
Please say sawang sulna. Sawang sulna.
Saban Suana.
Sawang sulna.
Saban Suana.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabina. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to
Very
meet you.
good.
Thank you for the lesson. I still have to learn.
Those are the Indonesian and Sundanese language. Well, thank you and you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
And the session, please open camera to all so we can take picture all together. Bisa Bulan? Foto. Okay, nanti Bulan will capture it for us. Okay.
Untuk slide pertama saya screenshot dulu ya. 1,
In English, please.
2, 3. Okay, next page. 1, 2, 3. Next page. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for Ibu Sabrina for providing us with a very fine lecture today about German. And I hope we can continue our cooperation in the future and you can come in person to Indonesia and to Bandung. And thank you to all participants who are really eager to ask questions and also to learn more about social work in Germany. Therefore, with this meeting, I end the session. Thank you for everyone who's involved and making this connection happen. See you in the future. Thank you, Ibu Sabrina.
Yes.
Success for the future.